Hello everyone, and a good afternoon to you all. My name is Pranay Shetty, associated with Cyberfrat as a team lead for B2C services, and I welcome you all to our Wednesday Wisdom session in association with OneFeed and our solution partner, Arcon. Our topic for today is building zero trust framework with Arcon. Arcon is a leading technology company specialized in providing risk control solutions. The vision of the company is to create a stack of products that work at the enterprise level to provide a robust control framework which works not only at the device level, but also across applications and business processes. With more than 500 global enterprises spanning wide range of industries such as banking, finance, insurance, telecom, government, oil and gas, and many more. All these companies trust Arcon solutions to safeguard their critical business information. And today, joining from Arcon, our guest speaker is Mr. Harshavardhan Lale. Mr. Harshavardhan is the VP of Business Development for SaaS. He heads the SaaS business unit and is also responsible for building integrations and with various OEMs. He is an experienced business professional, having over 2 decades of experience at various senior level positions in IT product campaign, Big Fours, and system integration companies across the globe. Followed by that, we have a product demo at the end, which will be led by Mr. Siddhant Rajadhyaksha, who is the pre-sales consulting handling at the APAC region and residential clients.
And thank you, Pranay, for the lovely introduction that you gave about Arcon and myself. Appreciate that. And welcome to all for this session. I intend to cover briefly about what ZTNA really is and how can Arcon really help you in building a better network or a better infrastructure using the Arcon products, right? So let me just start by sharing my screen. I hope that's visible to all. The agenda for today really is to ensure that we cover the evolution of the identity landscape. So how did it start 25 years back? Where are we? What is ZTNA? What's my interpretation of ZTNA? And what at Arcon do we believe ZTNA really means? And what is the need for a zero trust, right? What are the analysts saying? The identity first strategy, ITDR, and slightly about Arcon. So that's the flow that we are going to go with. The evolution of identity landscape. So I'm sure there would be at least, if not too many, at least a few people who belong to the era, which was 25 years back when I started my career, where for us, identity was really about network domains, right? We would think about perimeter, and there were times when people would say that having a firewall was really having a security in place for your organization, right? That was the time when identity was absolutely weak. Widespread password weaknesses and reuse of password was very common. So the administrators all across your servers would have administrator username and probably password as a password. That's the era that I'm talking about. That's when majority of the mainframes and PCs existed. So we were looking at local identities. People would only create users on the local machines or the local servers. The domain concept had just about begun, and people were not really doing anything much in the domain space. We moved slightly further, which is in the last 5 to 15 years, we have seen a big shift, and the shift was more in terms of enterprise-wide Active Directory. People have started adopting Active Directory, and that's where people have started onboarding the users and devices and stuff like that. Smart card authentications came into existence. So we started seeing a shift in the identity and access trends as well. So this was the era when we started seeing people use single sign-ons, and people also talking about two-factor authentication or multi-factor authentication. This is the time when we started having data centers, mobile devices in the infrastructure, and that is what led to that. But even then, what happened was there was a lot of credential theft attacks that happened, and mass password compromises happened. So, on the email front, I'm not sure how many of you have really experienced it, but a lot of the passwords got leaked during this era for the Gmails and the Yahoos of the world, right? From there, we are moving to the last 5 years. which is when a lot of hybrid and federated cloud identity really came into picture. So we're talking now about Azure Active Directory, we're talking about zero trust access control, we're talking about passwordless authentication. So basically what started was there was an emergence of hybrid and federated cloud identities. And this really led to, because of the cloud infrastructure, the CASB, ZTNAs, the SASEs, and the IoTs of the world, right? So this is how we have seen that the identity landscape has really evolved from local identities to really hybrid and federated cloud identities, where we are really using the ADFS and the likes of it pretty extensively. What is zero trust? It's an overused and widely misunderstood term, according to me at least, by many organizations, right? In a simple, in simple words, zero trust network access is an IT security solution that provides secure remote access to any organization's applications, data, services based on clearly defined access control policies, right? Why was there a need for this? There was a movement to decentralize data, right? So initially, if you see in the old era, the data was always sitting within the perimeter firewalls or within the perimeter of the organization. The assets were, majority of them were sitting within the boundaries of the organization, right? The applications were also hosted within the data centers and across multiple environments. But then there was a shift towards decentralization. So we started slowly and gradually saying, okay, can I host this on a cloud service? Can it be on AWS? Can it be on my private cloud? And stuff like that, right? So that's where the control that was there within your organization started to really cross the boundaries and go beyond it. The traditional castle and moat security strategy was ineffective in this era, and network security is no longer constrained to one location, because you have offices across the globe, you have customers across the globe, you have the cloud service providers who are offering you services all the way from US to Japan, from everywhere. So the network security is no longer constrained to one location, and that is exactly why people started to think about zero trust. Now, what does a ZTNA network really consist of? Right? It consists of three major things, according to me. The first is identity, the second is context, and the third is security. And at Arcon, we believe very strongly in all the three, right? So when we talk of identity or identifying the individual, so what we're saying is, in the old era, right, when we are talking about the evolution, uh, people believe that we should trust but verify, right? So please, register this. We believe that we should trust yet verify the authenticity of the individual. This is the era that I'm talking about. But now we're really shifting it. So we're talking about identification, authentication, and authorization. Right now, zero trust does not really stop at granting access. It really requires continuous re-verification. So it continuously requires validations and monitoring to be done to ensure that no one is able to really misuse the system, right? So what was the need for a zero trust? If you see what Forrester report is really saying, the October 2020 report, it says that 58% of the respondents experienced data breach in 2020. 55% experienced an increase in phishing attempts, right? There was a significant increase. So during the Corona period, almost all of us realized that people had started working from home, and thus the network had actually gone out of the perimeter in a very short span of time, where people did not have opportunity to really plug all the gaps they could, and that's when we had seen that there was a significant increase in the phishing attempts that happened. 33% reported that infrastructure outages have limited employee abilities to stay connected to workforce apps. 46% reported latency issues due to VPN connectivity. One of the things that people really consider, ZTNA is a replacement for VPN, and we'll discuss that in a short while. But most importantly, 29% reported at least one ransomware attack, right? I recently, while I was in Philippines, I spoke more about the ransomware attacks, and the average ransomware now is to the tune of $1.6 million, right? So, which is a big risk that we are sitting on currently. Now, as I mentioned some time back, there is a shift in the strategy from trust but verify to never trust and always verify, right? So when we're talking about zero trust networks, we're talking about never trusting an individual. So we're not saying that we don't trust the employees, but we want to ensure that nobody is misusing the credentials of the employees or of the vendors or of the customers, right? So what do attackers generally do? So we read in the or we saw in the previous slide that there was an increase in the phishing attacks, right? Excuse me. Attackers use identity to bypass network controls. Simple method is phishing. Credential thefts is the other way that people are really doing it. Passwords aren't enough to protect identities today. So we already have shifted to things like multi-factor authentication, right? So single-factor authentications, passwords, it's very difficult to really manage things using just the passwords. The attacks on credentials circumvent software assurances, right? So that's another area of concern for people around. Uh, the last and the biggest or the major issue that people are facing is identities being used outside of the network. Now, with the advent of cloud, mobile, IoT, people are not really sitting in the office locations. People are not sitting within the perimeter boundary and really working it. They are anywhere across the globe, not only in the city, not in the country, not only in the office. They could be anywhere in the globe, right? So, multiple identities and access control on different cloud services and devices is also becoming a challenge there. This is a small example of remote exploitation scenario. So, where a malicious cyber actor, or it could even be a disgruntled employee who's trying to compromise a user device through an internet-based mobile code exploit, that it can happen. In a typical non-zero trust scenario, the actor will get credentials. He will try to enumerate the network. He will try to escalate the privileges and move laterally through the network to compromise vast stores of data, right? However, in a zero trust environment, what we try and do is when the user is trying to come from an outside network, we would request them to validate and authorize their credentials. Now, we can do it in two ways. One is the users and two is the devices. And we will look at that in greater details. But what we're really trying to talk about here is how it really transpires, right? One of the interesting facts that I would really love to share with you is in terms of these attacks, by the time you realize that there was an attack that happened, it takes anywhere from 0 to 287 days. And that's the average that people have taken to really identify that there was some hacker sitting in their network and trying to do something, right? So that's where zero trust network becomes very important. One of the important things that you really need to think about is also the analytical capabilities, and we'll discuss that in a little while. But this is where you need to be really thinking about visibility and analytics in the network that you have. Exactly what I was trying to mention in the previous slide. So any individual who's trying to get an access, right, or the adversary, when he's trying to get into your network, the adversary is trying to maintain their foothold. So generally, you would see that the adversary would gain access to your network, and they would just lie low there, right? They wouldn't really do anything significant there. They would just lie low there. They will try and sniff around a little bit. They wouldn't do too much of activity to ensure that nobody would really be able to catch them. Once a lean period passes, right, they move to the third part where they will try to gradually increase their privileges. So he's trying to gain higher level of permissions. He or she is trying to gain a higher level of permissions there. Now, once they have these privileged credentials, right, then the adversary is trying to steal account names and passwords. That's the next thing that they will try to do. Once they have this, they will then try to move laterally in your organization, right? So from one system to the other system, from one application to the other application. At the end, what they try and do is exfiltration, right? The adversary is trying to steal data. They are trying to take crucial data, important data, confidential data out of your organization. Now, what are the analysts and regulators really saying for this? So the analysts of Gartner report on cybersecurity trends in 2021 and 2022, they gave a lot of stress on things like the SASE platforms, the zero trust, identity, threat detection and response, and we'll again touch upon this in some time. But what they are necessarily saying is, please understand that perimeter is not what it used to be in the past, right? Today, treat identity as the new perimeter. Now they're trying to say that your identity happens to be a perimeter. You don't really have to think about the entire perimeter that you have. The crux really lies in that identity that you have. So identity first security is a top trend according to Gartner. There is a preference to make in India for cybersecurity products. The normal and the standard method of CIA, confidentiality, integrity, and availability, is what RBI has been stressing on. So according to them, they're not only saying that you should have privileged access management solutions for accessing your infrastructure, but they are even saying to all access to the HSM should be managed and monitored using a robust PIM or a PAM solution, right? So they're not only restricting themselves to infrastructure, but they're spanning it even beyond and getting to do HSMs and the likes of it, So it could be key management services, HSMs, and stuff like that. So all the analysts are trying to work around the zero trust framework. Everybody from RBI, IRDA, US FDA, HIPAA compliance, everybody is now talking about identity as the as the new perimeter, and they are really trying to devise their strategies around that. Now, what's the zero trust strategy really? Right. As I was mentioning some time back, it is about really ensuring that you are able to identify, you are able to have a context to what it is, and you are able to manage the security of it. So when I say identify, right, we are talking about verifying explicitly. As the tagline says, you never trust, but always verify. So when you try to verify explicitly, what you're trying to do is you will always request the user to authenticate and authorize. Now, in a ZTNA kind of a network, every time a user is trying to access a new application, so for example, Harsh is trying to access application A, he will have to go through the entire cycle of verifying himself or herself, looking at the privileges that he or she has, and as a network or as a security personnel, I will also have to ensure that there is segmentation via the network, user, and stuff like that. So, we will have to verify it explicitly. You will always authenticate and authorize based on all available data points. So if Harsh is trying to access application A, Harsh will basis all of this only get access to application A. He wouldn't get access to application B. For getting access to application B, Harsh will again have to go through the entire trajectory of identification, authorization, authentication, and authorization. Right. So you will have to verify explicitly. Now, zero trust does not stop at granting access. As I said some time back, it requires continuous validation and monitoring. The second is once you've authorized, right, you need to ensure that you have granted the least privileges to every privileged identity as well. Right. Now we're talking about things like just in time. So in case a user needs any increased privileges or privileges at the higher level, they could be granted on a just in time and a just enough access basis, right? So you need not grant them access all throughout. It could be requested only for a specific time period. So it can be time bound. It could be just in time. It could be just enough access. So if the individual requires X rights to be assigned, you only assign X rights and don't really go them or go beyond that. So you are ensuring that you are giving them the least privileges required to ensure that they are able to finish their work in the most efficient way. Right? And the third most important thing is you have to assume breach, right? So you need to ensure, you need to assume that there is a breach that is always going to happen and there is a damage that will happen. So what you need to do is you need to prevent lateral movements. So from one application to the other, you should not really have access from one application to the other. So that kind of a lateral movement should be restricted. There should be segmentation access via the network, user devices, and application awareness. This is the crux of the zero trust here. So users, so if you ask me, these are 6 core pillars of zero trust, and the base of this really is identity. Because if you see, if anybody wants to really build a very strong zero trust network access environment, the 2 things that they will have to really look at is a zero trust strategy and also building a identity based segmentation there. So what are the 6 pillars of zero trust? Users, devices, networks, applications, automation, and analytics. Now, when I'm talking about users, what I'm trying to really emphasize upon is the fact that the ongoing authentication of trusted users, the continuous monitoring and validation of users' trustworthiness to govern their access and privilege, right? So this needs to be done on a continuous basis. On a devices front, we're talking about measuring the real-time cybersecurity posture and trustworthiness of devices. So we are not only saying that you need to have a secured access to the device, but we're talking about real-time cybersecurity posture and trustworthiness of the device. Talking about networks, the ability to segment, isolate, and control the network, include software-defined networks. Because when we are talking about the SASE kind of a network, we are talking about SD-WANs and things like those. So you are really looking at ensuring that you are taking care of the software-defined networks, software-defined WANs, and internet-based technologies. On the applications, what I'm trying to really refer here is securing and properly managing the application layer, as well as containers and virtual machines that you would require for these applications. Automations is the next pillar, which is security automations, orchestration. So it's basically we're talking about the SOAR framework, which allows organizations to automate tasks across products. It could be through workflows, and it could be through interactive end user oversights and things like those. So that's what we are really referring to when we talk about automation. And analytics is where we are talking about products like SIEM products. You need to really have a very good visibility and analytics tool, like an SIEM tool, or it could be advanced security analytics, it could be user business analytics, and things like those. Right. So how can Arcon really help you in all of this? We were talking about users, right? Now, users can be of two types. One, a common user, second, a privileged user. Now, how do you really manage access for these privileged users that you have? For that particular category, and which happens to be one of the pillars of the ZTNA network, is privileged access management. Now, what does privileged access management really help you with? It ensures that you can grant just-in-time access, just enough access. You are monitoring on a continuous basis, you are monitoring the access that has been provided to the end user on the servers. You are ensuring that you are recording everything that is happening from so there is a video log that is generated, and also you are able to record all the commands that are being fired by an individual. So you are trying to ensure that through the privileged access management, you are trying to contain the access that is being given to the end user. So what we mentioned some time back about verify explicitly is what we are trying to do through the privileged access management on the server side. So this is not only on the server side, this could be on servers, it could be on storage devices, it could be on your networking devices, it could be on your telecom devices, it could be on your IoT devices, any of it, wherever you have a privileged access that you have granted, you will be able to control, you will be able to monitor, and you will be able to validate the user on a continuous basis. So that is one of the crucial pillars that Arcon has, and this happens to be the flagship product of Arcon. The second thing is where we're talking about users, but on the desktop end, right? So we would also need to understand what's happening on the desktops of every individual. So we need to have endpoint privilege management and also the user behavior analytics. So when we talk about endpoint privilege management, we're talking about elevation of rights. So again, what we are trying to talk about here is you need to, one, verify who you are, two, least privileges. So what we propose to everybody is you should not grant anybody any significant right. So they should be at the lowest, the least privileged category. If a user, say for example, I am a user who wants to install Acrobat Reader on my machine, right? Let's take hypothetically that I need to have admin privileges to install an Acrobat Reader on my machine. And this is just a hypothetical situation. So I would then raise a request to grant me access for a certain period to implement or to install Acrobat Reader on my machine. So what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to do just in time, and I'm trying to do just enough access. So using those credentials, I would not be able to install any other product, but only the Acrobat Reader, for which I have a permission to really log on to it. Excuse me. We also have on both these privilege access and the endpoint privilege management, we also have the single sign-on capabilities inbuilt onto it, and also the multi-factor authentication, which happens to be one of the important pillars again for zero trust networks there. Just give me a minute. So that's the another pillar that we have. One of the important things again that we have on the endpoint privilege management is user behavior analytics. Now, what can we achieve with this? Now, this is an AI-based tool which keeps on running on a periodic basis. So it runs for say 90 days. It collects the statistics about what a user normally does in a day. The fair assumption is that in 90 days, you would have enumerated every possibility of using every application at least once for the application to garner that data and understand that yes, this is also a behavior that a credential really has. Now, at the end of the third month, if maybe probably the fifth or the sixth month, say Harsh does not have access to SAP, but Harsh is trying to gain access to SAP, it will then start throwing anomalies saying that there is some behavioral change that we are seeing with this particular credential. Please validate and verify if this is a genuine credential or if there is somebody who's trying to gain access to this credential. So that's what we achieve with the user behavior analytics that we have. Excuse me. Sorry for my bad throat. So this is exactly how Arcon is really able to help you with your ZTNA. Now, one of the things that I also mentioned sometime back was around the identity threat detection and response. Now, this is something new that Gartner has really launched in February of this year. They strongly believe that there are these 9 capabilities that every organization should have to ensure that they are protected or they have a robust identity solution within the organization. So they said, okay, why don't you really have these? If you can have these 9 capabilities in your organization, you can be sufficiently sure that you have abilities to detect the threat on the identity and respond to it as well. So one, you are able to detect the identity, you are able to detect the threat, and you are able to respond to it. Now, according to Gartner, really no organization in the world or no software vendor in the world has a solution that can provide effective solution for all the 9 capabilities that they had listed. But as luck were to have it, Arcon happens to be the only organization which is able to meet all the 9 capabilities, although not through one single product, but with the product stack that we have, which is what we have presented here. So through this, stack that we are able to really ensure that identity is taken care of, right? So we are able to ensure that we are able to verify the identity, we are able to grant the least privileges, and we are able to ensure that the network is secure there. So this is what we can cover through the Gartner's identity threat detection and response initiative that, or the capability matrix that they have driven. Coming to the last part of my technical presentation here, we are really talking about what should the security data analytics journey be for an organization, right? So I'm really talking about collection. Now, when I'm talking about collections, I'm talking about we being able to collect basic security logs and machine data for your environment. Now, Arcon has, as I mentioned sometime back, the user behavioral analytic product, which can help you collect any and every data that you require from a machine that can be collected. Next is normalization. So once you have collected the data, you should move to the normalization piece where we are talking about how do you apply a standard security taxonomy and add asset and identity data, right? So here I'm talking more about the security configuration manager product that we have now. This ensures that you have a hardened infrastructure which is same across all the organization. So there are 2 components to the SCM product that we have, which is security configuration management and also the file integrity monitoring. Now, a combination of these 2 can really help you ensure that your configuration is one, hardened properly, 2, that you can have golden copies created of your critical files, configurations, applications, folders, and you can run. So when you keep running the FIM component on a periodic basis, so it could be daily, weekly, 10 days, fortnightly, monthly, whatever that is, and you can do a comparison to see if there is any change. Now, what happens is you may not have realized it. There could be a malware that was that got infiltrated into your organization. Touchwood, it may not have really triggered itself, but it may be sitting as a payload on some file somewhere. Now, this FIM application can give you an insight saying that, okay, there is some change that has happened on this particular file. Please validate that, which can really help you track that, right? So that's where normalization would really happen. For the expansion, we're talking about collecting additional data sources like endpoint activity, network metadata, to drive advanced attack detection. And that is exactly where the EPM component comes into the picture, where we are talking about the endpoint privilege management, right? So that is where the EPM component of Arcon can really help you. The next one is enrichment, where we're talking about augmenting the security data with intelligence sources. And that's exactly where the data intellect component comes into picture. So the UBA can help you collect all the data, right? It can help you, and it is actually collecting every data that you want. But now you want to really use that data for your benefit, right? You want to really interpret the data. You want to ensure that you are able to collect the right inputs from the data, and you are able to do the remediation for that. Now that can be done through a product which is called a data intellect, which again Arcon has. And the last one is automation, orchestration, and advanced threat detection. This is nothing but you need to establish a consistent and repeatable security operations capability, and that's exactly what ITDR is all about. So when you look at all the 9 capabilities that Gartner has mentioned, and if you put all the Arcon components there in the place, right in the place, you would be able to achieve the automation, orchestration, and advanced threat detection. Now, a little bit about, so I'll just take 5 minutes and talk about Arcon. So I've described the products, the product lines, and how we can really help you build a very strong zero trust network. Arcon is a leading information security solutions provider. We have been in the industry for more than 15 years now. Our vision is to continuously develop a robust stack of products that would help enterprises to predict, protect, and prevent IT risks. That's what we are working towards. We are headquartered in Mumbai with R&D center in Mumbai. We are international. We have customers in 75 plus countries. We have more than 1,100 plus customers. We have a great channel partner ecosystem. Not really spending too much time on this. One of the capabilities that I would really like to highlight is Arcon. All the solutions that I mentioned to you about are available both on-premise and on cloud. And because we have it on our cloud, we also have the SOC 2 Type 2 compliance certificates. We have the ISO 27001 and all the other required security certifications that we need. We have affiliations with all these industry bodies, so be it CIS, PICI, ISACA, CII, CSI, NASCOM. Most importantly, the point that I really wanted to bring about here is for the second year running, Arcon has been recognized as the customer's choice in the Gartner Peer Insights. Now, the report for 2022 should be out in the next maybe 10-15 days, but we are hoping to be again part of that. The voice of the customer is not really coming from smaller customers, but if you see 80% of the customers who have responded to this have spoken very highly about Arcon, and that is the reason that we have won this particular recognition for 2 years in succession. Again, very important point here, we are part of the Gartner's Magical Quadrant, as Pranay also mentioned in the beginning. This is the second year that we are leaders in the Gartner's Magical Quadrant. We have moved significantly up in terms of our ease to deploy. We are also moved significantly further in the overall completeness of the product. And you would have seen it by now that Arcon is not just a PAM solution, but we are offering any and every solution that you require within the identity domain. Arcon scores, again, we were at 3.8 in the last year, and this is pretty significant because if you see, we are the only ones now in above 4 in the critical capability metrics that Gartner has published for privileged access management. We are included in the 2021 Gartner Asia Pacific Magical Quadrant. It's not only that we are recognized by Gartner, but Kapinger Cole also considers us in the leadership quadrant. So we happen to be part of the leadership, again, the leadership quadrant that they have in Kapinger Cole. That's all about it. Thank you for being patient and listening to me. Really appreciate you spending time with me. I would now like to call upon Siddhant, who happens to be the pre-sales engineer at Arcon, and he would like to take you through the PAM product more. So handing it over to Siddhant.
Yes, thank you, Harsh. Thank you for the quick introduction. I will be taking you through the technical presentation for our PAM solution today. So yeah, let me just bring up my presentation. Basically, Harsh has covered the topic from the point of view where, why a PAM solution is required within the organization when it comes to protecting your identities and your credentials, which are, of course, in a shared form, right? The traditional approaches where credentials were still password at 123 or pass at 123, and admins names were already given, and these were the shared ones. Now in that case, because there was a lot of lack of accountability and lack of audit trails also, because you don't know who is accessing what and why and when it is being accessed and from where it is being accessed. So the big W, the question mark, which comes into the picture, right? Looking at the root and cause of all these problems, the PAM solution comes in. I would now just show you the features of Arcon PAM. When we say we built a zero trust framework, we believe in it. We have also segregated it in three terms, one being security, then efficiency, and then compliance part of it. So when we talk about security, we focus on several aspects within, like the fine-grained access control. So over here, we focus on who needs to have access to what device and when it is necessary. So again, just-in-time privilege is something which is also covered here. You also actually then, let's say, assign a specific device to a specific user depending on that user's role within the organization. Of course, then we also consider vaulting of your user credentials, the password vaulting, which we talk about, which is very important because we are not just storing them, but then we are ensuring that they are stored in an encrypted format. They are not accessible to any of the normal or even privileged users, but because of the dual layer of protection which we apply over it, we ensure that your root credentials, your Windows admin credentials, or even your other credentials for, let's say, your cloud consoles, your IAM roles or so, they are stored in a secure way. Then of course, organizations nowadays are already, implementing MFA or multi-factor authentication. So in fact, we do provide integration with the existing MFAs. These can be your Microsoft Authenticator or the Google Authenticator. But there is also something which is unique from our end, because we have our own authenticator application, which is available on the Play Store and the App Store for iOS. So for, let's say, for SMEs who may not be having the bigger MFAs which are already out there, they can actually start using our own MFA very quickly on the go. Well, of course, then since we talked about password vaulting, we also have password reconciliation into the picture. So password management or password rotation, because of compliances itself. So when we talk about 30 days of password rotation or 45 days of password rotation or so on, we make sure that this rotation is happening in a real time and in a sync capability. We ensure that there is no password that actually is repeated once again. And then coming on to hard coded embedded passwords. So sometimes applications which are connected to the databases, they are using these embedded passwords. So for that, we also have our app to app password management feature, using which you can also manage the certain credentials for that applications. Then coming on to application gateway server, what we are talking about over here is basically a app streaming server, which using which you can actually present let's say a particular instance of a particular database or even a particular server to the user in the browser itself. So it would be then presented in the form of a browser tab, and it will be shipped via HTTPS itself. So it's end to end in a secured tunnel. Then coming on to the efficiency part of it, wherein we then focus on the broader aspect of it, by beginning with the virtual grouping section, wherein you first start off by, let's say, creating different geographical locations according to your data centers, maybe, or even according to your different departments. Then you can define your different user devices, or rather your user groups or server groups or so on. You can define such virtual groups. You can also then create your own workflow management. So let's say within the application, you can define workflows. There can be up to, let's say, maximum up to 5 to 7 workflow levels. And of course, once applied, the user has to basically go through each and every level of workflow. Once the approval is given, then only the user would be able to, perform certain activity, like taking access to a particular application or device, or while requesting for a particular password or so. Then coming on to auto discovery part of it, of course, since you are already vaulting all your, let's say, privileged IDs from your Windows servers on the PAM solution, using the auto discovery feature, you are also able to recognize, let's say, what all different types of users I have sitting on my device. Sometimes the administrator is also unaware of that. So using this feature, you will be not be able to only see them once, but you can schedule them, let's say, every 3 days, and you can get to know if there is a new user which is created on a particular server and is still lying dormant as such. Then coming on to analytics, basically this is also a very unique feature which comes into our end, from our end, which is the night analytics feature. So apart from just looking at the traditional logging, which is the video logs and the text logs part of it, using the night analytics over here, what we are doing is basically applying the data warehousing technique, wherein we are using AI ML model to make the data, rather to learn or train the data and understand what all different aspects can be grown from it. So if, let's say, we are talking about anomalies which could be generated from the user behavior aspect, an example of that could be a user who has been taking a active session for a particular Windows server, and the user has been, starting a certain application, performing activity and closing the session. Now, after, let's say, 30 days or so, the user has now started logging in at a very odd timing. Secondly, the user is not actually opening the particular application he was using, but now he is actually starting another application altogether, or sharing some data which might be confidential. This could be an anomaly, and alerts could also be sent to the administrator that an anomaly is found on this particular user, because as we can learn from the data, we know that there was a standard use which was happening, and then there was some fluctuation wherein we understand, okay, some anomaly has been caused or it's detected. So that is something again which is very unique from our end. Then we have single sign on. Of course, when we are already vaulting the credentials for all the different types of devices, these can be again your Windows servers, your Linux boxes, your web-based applications, or your cloud consoles. We also then help you take single sign on to all the different devices on a click of a button. Then we have user onboarding as a module. Basically, using this particular feature, we are able to scan through your AD, understand what all different users you have, and you can also automatically onboard them into the solution. With the one admin control, we are also providing a centralized dashboard to your administrators for them to look at all the different data centers which you have, all the different, let's say, services which you have within the organization, for them to also look at the different reports and the dashboards aspect of it. Now, then we also have multi-tab as a feature here. So multi-tab is basically a feature wherein we let the users take sessions to all the different applications or servers, just like how you search in your browsers. So instead of toggling between different windows, we let the users use the tab feature select a new tab, select the session which needs to be taken, and voila, you would be able to then, switch between multiple sessions very easily. And last but not the least, in this particular framework, wherein compliance, which is very important, as Harsh also mentioned earlier, one of the major reasons why such solutions are looked at in the market is because from a compliance point of view, you need to have certain types of reports which are needed to be generated when it comes to your user activity, your activity which is being done on the servers part of it, or in general when you need to understand what all privileges are being given to a particular user. Using this module, you are looking at the customized reporting part of it, the text and video logs of each and every user session. So you would be able to see what a user did when the session was taken, what type of command was fired, was it a restricted command, was a proper approval taken or so. And coming on to session monitoring, so not only looking at the logs part of it, but we also have session monitoring, which is, by what I mean, is real time session monitoring. So let's say, again, an example of this would be, let's say an external vendor is coming into your organization and taking access to a particular server, right? In this case, your administrator can actually view that user's live screen, see what all activity is being carried on. And not only that, let's say if the administrator does not want the vendor to continue that activity, he or she can also then freeze that user session. Freezing is one option. If you don't want the user to continue at all, the administrator also has a terminate button which can be used. So freezing, unfreezing, and also termination of a session is something which is very interesting with this particular feature. And of course, as I mentioned, reporting and dashboards part of it. So using, let's say you might also have the auditors within the organizations who look at all the different reports and dashboards part of it. We provide an amazing dashboard with it, wherein they could just come in, select, or rather search for what particular report they want. Do they want to look at the user access review, or do they want to review what all specific commands are being fired or so? They can just quickly search for them, generate reports, download them, and send them across to anyone who requires them. So this was majorly from the features point of view for Arcon PAM. I will be now quickly running through a couple of more slides, just focusing on the smaller aspects, rather, from this slide, wherein we are looking at the password vault, which is basically an electronic vault. It is encrypted with AES 256-bit encryption, plus we apply our own algorithm over it, so it's protected with the dual layer of encryption. This vault stores your credentials for your services, for your domain accounts, for your local accounts. These may be your root users, your administrators, or even your database admins or network device admins, or so on. With this, we also, since we are already performing password management on those, we are also providing unlimited password history so as to not repeat a password with it. Password release workflow is also something which is quite interesting, because let's say a particular administrator requires a particular password for time being, he can actually raise a request for that password, get access to it, and the administrator can release that particular password for, let's say, 1 hour or 2 hours. So the just in time privilege comes into picture with the password release workflow as well. Coming on to single sign on, I would like to just impress upon you this particular part, that with our ConPAM we provide the largest out of the box connector stack. So by connector stack, what I mean is the integrations which are to be done with all the different types of, not only the servers or the Unix flavors or network devices, but even your different applications. These can be your thick clients, these can be your web browser based applications. So nowadays we also have network devices which are accessible via web consoles, and that is something wherein you are not able to connect to them over CLI. In that case, we provide you the RPA bot, which helps you take single sign on to that particular device, Not only that, but we can also actually perform password management using our robotic process automation. So the RPA bot automation technology to change the password or to rotate the password on several devices as well. Then coming on to the privilege session management part of it, we are talking not about the traditional aspects of the logs like the video logs or the text logs, but the command based logs as well. So talking about your commands which are fired on your CLI based systems like RM minus RF. If you want to restrict that, that is also there. If you want to record all each and every command, that will also be given in this. And let's say even for your databases, you'll be able to get all the queries which are fired in your database. And talking about processes, we also have that. So if your particular user actually started a registry editor or task manager or even certain application, you'll be able to get all the process based logs on that. And coming on to the last part here, which is access control and granular access management, wherein I would just talk about the access types and the virtual grouping, the device based or user based grouping, talking about access types like permanent, time based, and one time access that can actually be assigned to a particular user. So you can assign if a particular user needs to have access to a particular machine on one time basis or time based basis. And also the blacklisting part of it. So by blacklisting, I mean restriction of the commands or queries that are to be fired on your database or CLI based systems, or even restriction of processes. An example which I just said, if you don't want the user to open a registry editor, you can restrict that as well. Certain other slides I would just quickly go through and wrap up my presentation. Firstly, being the web app integrations, as I mentioned, not only help you with the single sign-on aspect of it or session management, but even performing password change for your web applications. We are able to do that and provide access controls wherever with necessary with the workflows part of it. So this is where we have actually put in the use of RPA bots, and we are able to achieve all these features with it. And coming on to authentication, so of course we are able to support multi-tenancy, multi-domain authentication. So your data centers can actually be spread across the globe, and you might have multiple domains for your data centers or your organization. You'd be still be able to see them within one dashboard centralized. We, not only that, we also provide you local authentication, which is the Arcos auth, which is a basically a repository which comes with our own solution, uh, which could be actually used, let's say, for external vendors again. So these are the vendors who are temporary users who come into your organizations, and for them you have to create AD users or other domain users. So with our local repository into the picture, you do not do so. You can actually create them in our repository, assign them the service which needs to be accessed, and just voila, you don't have to actually then even delete them later on. They could actually be disabled by themselves. And coming on to integration with your dual factor integration, of course, as I mentioned earlier, we are able to do integration as well as we have our apps. Of course, SMS based OTPs or email based OTPs is something which could be integrated and also then generated for you. A quick features basically wherein we have auto onboarding. We are able to achieve or rather I would say achieve rule based automation when it comes to onboarding of all of your AD users and services. We are able to understand what all different users I have. I can actually, while onboarding, just quickly select which group this particular user will go through, like my Windows admins, my security team, my infosec team, my all the other teams, application teams, and so on. I can quickly map them to their respective groups. The same goes for the servers, and they could be assigned. Coming on to smart session monitoring, again, an example of this would be an auditor will not be actually be able to sit and look at all the different video logs which are generated, because each video log can actually be as long as 10 hours or 12 hours. So using this feature, we are able to make these logs intelligent, then we are also able to identify what all critical events that have occurred during that user session. So they can be execution of a certain query or firing of a certain command or so. The auditor can then just on a click of a button, he can actually jump onto that particular point in the video and see what activity was being performed. So this can also be actually integrated with different rather applications or thick clients or web-based applications also. This is certainly the architecture of Arcon PAM, wherein instead of letting a direct connection from the user machine to all the different target servers, we use a secure gateway which is via the port 22, basically over a Linux box, using which you do not even have to keep the port 3389 open from the user machine. So basically you are reducing your vulnerability aspects. You are actually reducing your user exposure on the network. The user cannot actually then connect directly to the target devices. They have to come into PAM, then they have to click on the single sign on button and then take the connection via PAM itself. So the secured gateway over here basically establishes an encrypted tunnel, which then gives you, let's say, connection to whichever device which is necessary. And over here, I would like to just focus on this part wherein Arcon PAM has a very highly scalable architecture. This is something also which Gartner has recognized within us. They have mentioned that because we are able to provide certain gateways like the secure gateway and the application gateway, which is our application streaming server, basically, using which we are able to suffice both of our clients' requirements when it comes to streaming of certain instances to the user machine, or rather giving connection to a particular server directly. So using the AGW, we are actually able to give the connection to a user via port 443 itself. So this was about my presentation, team.